Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the special City Council meeting. I'm calling this meeting to order. Could you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for our statement of values? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
As we gather, we humbly seek blessings upon this meeting. May we act with the strength, courage, and will to perform our obligations and duties to our people with justice to all. Let us seek wisdom so that we may act in the best interest of our people, our neighbors, and our country. All this we ask so that we may serve our community with fairness and respect, putting their needs before all.
Thank you. Please be seated. Roll call, Assistant City Clerk.
Vice Mayor Hardy.
Present.
Councilmember O'Neill.
Here.
Councilmember Davis.
Here.
Councilmember Watanabe.
Here.
Councilmember Chahal.
Here.
Mayor Gilmore.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. This morning, I'm presiding over a special meeting of the City Council. Our task today is really a simple one, to adopt a resolution ratifying our curfew. But this morning in Santa Clara and in America, a lot of things don't seem so simple. A lot of things just don't seem right. I hear from our residents, I hear that from my kids, and I feel that in my heart. For months, we've battled the most serious public health crisis in a century. We've been forced to change our lives and our habits. And in Santa Clara, we have risen to the challenge. I'm really proud of our city. We've demonstrated that to protect ourselves and our families, we've had to act as a community. We've had to care about our neighbors as much as we care about ourselves. That's why we wear masks in public. That's why we maintain social distance. And that's why we deliver food to seniors who can't shop and to school kids who would go hungry without our help. Now we face another challenge. 10 days ago in Minneapolis, George Floyd died tragically, terribly, under the knee of a police officer. The world saw George Floyd plead for his life. The world saw George Floyd plead for help. The world saw George Floyd beg to breathe. And the world saw George Floyd die. Around the world, our world will never be the same. If we could go back in time and change 9 minutes, we would. Then George Floyd would return to life and his family and his community. But we can't, so we can only move forward. And as we move forward, we can dedicate ourselves to make the world a better place. We can, in fact, we must dedicate ourselves to change our communities and our nation. We don't want to see anyone treated like George Floyd in Santa Clara or anywhere in the world. As a mayor and as a mother, I'm really concerned that we're at a major tipping point for our future. But I'm also optimistic. I see what we've done as a community in Santa Clara to respond to the pandemic. Every day, I see genuine concern for our neighbors and the most vulnerable among us. I really see Santa Clarans pulling together. We know that Black lives matter. We know that as President Barack Obama said yesterday, your lives matter, your dreams matter. We know that we have to take care of each other if we want to take care of ourselves. That's even more true and more challenging in a multicultural and multiracial city like Santa Clara. Our neighbors are of different races and religions and sexual orientations. We may look different, we may speak different languages, but we're all Santa Clarans, and we're all pulling for each other. That's what's required if we want to make our world a better and more peaceful place, and honor the memory of George Floyd, to whom we are dedicating today's meeting. Thank you. City Attorney, I know you'd like to make some comments as well.
Thank you, Mayor, council members, fellow staff. As the city attorney of the city where Colin Kaepernick first took a knee, and as the father of 2 biracial African-American children who live and go to school in Santa Clara, I feel that I must say something at this moment in history. What struck me most about George Floyd's killing was not only the act itself, but the blatant, open manner in which it was conducted. With cameras rolling in front of dozens of witnesses, those officers took the life of an unarmed man being taken into custody for allegedly passing a $20 bill. Growing up as the brother of a man who struggled with mental illness all his life, I saw compassionate police officers take a severely distressed young white man into custody under very difficult circumstances. So I know it can be done safely by officers who take the care to do it properly. Just last year, my sister and her African-American husband were driving through Arkansas when they were followed for miles and inevitably pulled over by a white highway patrolman. Without even being told the reason for the stop, my brother-in-law was ordered to exit his car and get into the back of the patrol car. As he got out, the patrolman commented, "You're a big one, aren't you?" He refused to get into the patrol car. Eventually, they got out of the situation without a ticket or physical abuse. They left the state and drove all the way back to New York without stopping, vowing never to go to Arkansas again. My brother-in-law was terrified of the encounter, as are almost all black men who are targeted by police. Santa Clara is not Arkansas. In fact, having lived here in an interracial family, I think the diverse Bay Area is one of the best places to live in peace with our neighbors of all races. But neither has Santa Clara become a racial utopia. I have observed instances of what I at least perceive to be biased actions, even by some of our police officers. When I spoke to the previous police chief last year about one of them, he promised to get back to me. I'm still waiting. I call upon all of us to engage honestly with the community and with each other to further break down the attitudes that separate us so that we can see each other as brothers and sisters and treat each other with the respect that deserves. Thank you.
Thank you. City Manager, would you like to make some comments?
Sure, thank you. As you can imagine, this is a very difficult topic for me. It's personal as a woman of color. And I want to start by sharing a quote that I read from my mentor. And I sent him a response yesterday because when I read his quote, it was very powerful and helped me explain the emotions that I have been feeling. He stated, "We are currently dealing with 2 viruses in this country, COVID-19 and racism 20. One kills the body and the other kills the spirit. We must not let either win." And as your city manager, I've been working on both of these issues, and I have dedicated a career to working on issues of justice and equity. I wanted to share this quote because I finally had to admit that I have a wounded spirit over these issues. I want to share why I feel wounded so much. My father didn't get to finish high school because he was taken to the Vietnam War. And when he did his training, he was stationed in the South. And he had to make the decision, after being beaten several times because he was a Mexican in the South, that it was safer and his likeliness of living was more likely in Vietnam than in the South. That was in the 1960s. I'm about to send my daughter off to college, reaching a point of privilege that people like me, as an African-American Latina, often don't reach, and that is to attend Columbia University at Barnard College. We know that we are sending her to a point of privilege in the fear of danger, knowing what's happening in New York and the likeliness that she will experience racism as she herself adults in a point of privilege. The context of her adulting matches much of what my dad experienced, except she comes from a different place of privilege. But it is still with racial conflict 60 years later. I want for people of color to have the change, and I want for us to be held up to the values that we know this country has never served people of color by. We can't ever think that this can't happen here in Santa Clara or in any part of this region, because clearly we have seen incidents at a micro level like the city attorney just spoke to. I want to work so that our spirits are wounded, and I want to work with the city of Santa Clara so that we do better and ensure that this stuff never happens again. Thank you, Mayor.
Brian? Thank you for those comments, City Attorney and City Manager. Brian, did you want?
Yeah, I would invite all of us to take a knee, not against the flag, not against the anthem, not against the Pledge of Allegiance, but for George Floyd, for his memory.
And a moment of silence.
And a moment of silence, please.
So, thank you for all those comments. This is a tough situation, but I'll tell you, we are going to vow to make change and to make things better. We need action, and that's become very, very clear. We need to change and take action now. And many of us are in a position to affect that change. So I'm so happy to hear the comments from our city manager and city attorney, and I'll probably hear from some council members as well. So I have Councilmember Chahal. You have some comments, please?
Thank you, Mayor. And I do join you and Brian and Deanna in these tough times. And it is really, really tough time from both COVID-19 and the racial relationship point of view. These are tough times for our country. Our communities have been going through COVID-19, and now we have these legitimate protests for reform in policing and race relationships. We as individuals, as organizations, or as departments have room for improvement, and it is time to deep dive into our policies and procedures to have better race relations in our community. We do have fantastic police force, but keeping in view what has been happening in our country every now and then, it is our moral duty to review our policies and procedures in this context. We have received so many emails to make sure communities and municipalities make appropriate changes in our policing. I agree that we have to be proactive, and time has come to act and make appropriate changes. We do not have to reinvent the wheel, but there are resources already available which can be very helpful in making appropriate changes. Some of the steps I would suggest are, as President Obama has said, It is time that we as leaders should read and implement the Task Force 21st Century Policing, a report which outlines specific evidence-based reforms, ways to build trust between police and community members, save lives, and not increase crime. It is time for us to review our use of force policies with members of our community, our PD, and commit to reforms, required reforms. In the times where most of our decisions are based on data, whether decisions are financial or behavioral, we do have great amount of data and information to guide us and tell us what works and what does not. Let us look at recommendations from organizations like Campaign Zero, Color of Change, 8can'twait.org, and see what can we do in our case. It is shame that Eric Gardner, George Floyd, and many more have been murdered in broad daylight. I had tears in my eyes watching the video, which I could not even finish. Let us prioritize to do whatever we can to make sure such incidences do not happen anywhere in our country and do our duty at our city level to make appropriate reforms on priority. So today, I'm asking that we look into establishing a task force which reviews both our policing practices and race relations within our community and make appropriate changes. Let us do everything we can to end racism and racial injustices in our city and country. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you for those comments. Councilmember Watanabe.
Thank you, Mayor, and thanks for the opportunity to speak. I know that this is a very emotional issue for many of us, and I thank the city manager and our city attorney for sharing their personal stories and along with their personal concerns. And I know that it definitely has a direct impact on how they want to see the city moving forward. I want to just share that, as for myself, I may not understand our on a day-to-day basis, what Black or brown people go through in terms of being concerned about being approached by public safety, the police. But at the same time, I've had my own personal experience, which I shared on Facebook last night regarding when I lived in New York. I was about 25 years old and I got pulled over taking a friend home from church on a Sunday evening in East New York, which, if anybody knows where East New York is in Brooklyn, it's not the best of neighborhoods. But I was pulled over and police approached my vehicle on both sides, two officers with guns drawn, and I had no idea what was going on. And fortunately, after they asked for identification and I indicated that I was taking my friend home, they let me know that it was a mistaken identity. My vehicle fit the description of another vehicle that they were looking for, and I was allowed to leave. But at the same time, it had a profound impact on me. And so I can understand why there is this outcry right now. I was able to walk away, but there are a lot of people that can't walk away. There are a lot of people that cannot change the color of their skin. And so I know that as leaders, and from listening to former President Barack Obama yesterday, that we have an opportunity to affect change at the local level. We are a city of diverse, multicultural population, and we need to take this time, this in history, this time in our city to affect change and learn and listen more than anything else. We need to listen. We've received countless emails from young people telling us that we need to change, and it changes here. I've tried to my best to respond to every email that we've received over the last 24 hours to let those folks know that we take this seriously and we will be taking action. I've been in touch with a young man that we recently appointed to a commission who has expressed to me his issues with personal discrimination here in Santa Clara. And it happened in the past, but we have an opportunity with a new police chief that wants to take some actions, that wants to explore the changes that we can make as a council, as a police department, and as a city. But it can't happen unless we all work together, unless we all listen to each other and respect each other. So I thank you, Mayor, again, City Manager, City Attorney, for providing this opportunity this morning for us to be able to share our own thoughts and concerns, but more importantly, support to make a change for the better for the city of Santa Clara. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Watanabe. Vice Mayor Hardy?
Yes, thank you. No one can watch the recent events without being horrified. And that is the normal response. Sorry. I had a very dear friend here in the city send me a heartfelt thought that I would like to share. My hope for Santa Clara is that our officers' focus is being the peace rather than keeping the peace. Meaningful change starts with us being mindful of the basic humanity of everyone. May Santa Clara and our Santa Clara PD be good to themselves, good to their duty, and good to our community. We need to just treat everyone with the respect we all deserve. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember O'Neill?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I too appreciate greatly the comments that you made at the beginning of the meeting and the very heartfelt statements from our City Manager Santana and City Attorney Doyle. And I appreciate very much that we all want to work with our police department, and I am a huge believer in that too. And you know, some of the steps that we have taken in recent years, the kind of militarization of our police department, and also asking our police department to kind of become the do-all, be-all. And I think some of the things that the police department has to respond with, I think as a community, we need to say, we need to be investing. And some of these are insights that I got also from listening from some of the webinar that former President Obama sponsored yesterday. But looking at how do we make the right investments in our community so that so that the kind of situation that City Attorney Doyle referenced with his brother with his mental health issues, or when I hear from the police department that so many of our calls are domestic violence calls that oftentimes escalate into other situations, or people that are out on the street. How do we make investments? I'm a huge believer in prevention. How do we as a community say we all, we have not been making the proper investments so that we can live in peace, that all lives really are being respected by making sure that people have the resources that they need. And we certainly need to have many changes in our policing policies, but I would like us to look at how can we make investments in our community so that that policing becomes more like going back to becoming a peace officer or a community representative, and not, like I said, the end all situation to address many other problems that haven't been addressed, and without those officers having the proper tools. But I also want to ask all of the community to, there's been mention of listening to each other. I think that's incredibly important, particularly those of us who come from a European heritage where, there's, I just think, a lack of awareness. And I think that, and I still see this amongst some of my friends, we have to be brave enough to not just work on the problem that we have here today, but to say, how did we get here? And to be willing to examine the history of this country. We love our country. It's a fabulous country, but there's a lot of not very good stuff in the history of this country. And where we are now is the culmination of 400 years of bad stuff. And I think in order to really root that out, we need to be willing to all talk about that and to recognize how all of this is built up. And some of us have closed our eyes to it. And I'm grateful that I have had people in my life who have helped open my eyes to that. And something that I'll mention is that I remember in high school, a very wonderful teacher that I had, and we read the novel by Alan Paton, Cry the Beloved Country, which was about South Africa. And that was a life-changing experience for me to read that book. And I was given an assignment by the teacher to make a presentation, a 45-minute presentation to the class about apartheid. And one of my major takeaways from that book was that certainly the Africans in South Africa were horribly treated and their liberties were taken away. But it became clear to me reading that book that the white people really weren't free either. That, that they didn't even fully, had no clue as to how constrained their life was because of the racism that they were inflicting. So I want us to have that duality. What can we do here now? But let's look at our history. Let's look how we got here, because that's how we will truly have everybody be liberated. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember O'Neill. Councilmember Davis?
Unique. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello? Okay. My situation is different. I am in an interracial marriage. A lot of people don't know that, and recently in my, council experience, been called a racist, and people didn't even know that I was married to a African American police officer that served the city of Santa Clara. So I think that Teresa O'Neill hit on it. We are human beings, and I think we have lost sight of being nice to each other, accepting each other for diversity and religion. And I think that it has just exploded in the death of this man on television as we watched this happen, and nobody did anything to stop it. And we are all guilty. We need the change. I have gone through this with my husband. It's not, and I know that Brian is in that same situation. I know a lot of interracial couples that have gone through a lot of things that were said to their face, behind their backs. I mean, it's atrocious that you choose to love someone, but because of what they look like, you're wrong. So I think the perception in our country needs to change. I think that when we just have to get back to humanity, and we've lost that. We have totally lost that. And I was going through 62 letters that were sent to me that said that I need to defund law enforcement and I need to have my husband wear a body camera. He did wear a body camera when he was working in Santa Clara. So I know that we work hard in our city to make sure, because it is well represented with the diversity of our city, but at the same time, I think we're losing some sight on we are human beings, and we need to be treated with respect. We need to understand people. And I got involved with sister cities because of that reason, because General Eisenhower, back in the day, he was the president when I was born, realized at wartime that we were becoming a global nation and that we needed to understand culture. We needed to understand religion. We needed to understand where we all came from. So it's like, I know that when Rodney King down in LA riots, it was like the mantra was, why can't we all get along? What happened? It was said, there were protests back in the 60s, and here we are, 40 years later, and we're still fighting the same thing. So it bothers me that I've been in a relationship with a man for over 30 years, and I still feel it. He feels it. He's a member or a retired member of a police department. He felt it. So I'm just asking people to understand and get back to the fact that we are human beings and stop this stuff. It's got to end. And I agree with what the city manager said. We are fighting two viruses, something that is definitely killing our bodies, but the other is killing what we are and what we should be. As a nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty for justice and all. Why are we not doing this? So I thank you, Brian, for your words. I thank you, city manager, for your words, and my council members. But I think that we have to get rid of perception. We have to care about each other, and we have to get back to basic human rights. So that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, council members, for all the comments. And I know we have some next steps which we will be discussing at our next meeting. Just to let the council know, I signed the pledge that was put out to the mayors across the country by President Obama. And it's My Brother's Keeper Alliance that is asking our cities to commit to really 4 things, and we'll go over them when it's actually on our agenda so we can take some action. One is to review our police use of force policies. The second is to engage our community by including a diverse range of input, experiences, and stories in our review. The third is to report the findings of our review to our community and to seek feedback. And fourth is to reform our community's police use of force policy. So I did sign the pledge on behalf of the city of Santa Clara, and I believe we'll be talking about that is it, city manager, our next Tuesday's meeting or very soon? We'll be on the agenda and asking the council for a formal action on that. We do have someone on the line. It's number 1. The last 4 numbers of your phone number are 1851. Caller.
Hi, my name is Mary Grizzle. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Mary. Go ahead.
My name is Mary Grizzle, and I'd like to add to everything that was said. I'm sitting here crying over everything that's been said, but one thing that we've got to also remember is the last maybe 10 years that the police force have had a target on their back. I am not excusing what happened with Mr. Forbes. I think that was absolutely horrible, and we have not learned a lesson. Change has to come from the top to the bottom, and the police need to police themselves. However, both sides have had targets on their back. The police officers in the last 10 years, you read about 1 a month being shot and killed. And we know that they're under a lot of pressure without having the proper education to deal with that pressure. So I feel that both sides have grievances. I feel that both, especially the police, need further training, and they need to police themselves. my heart goes out to the Floyd family and to all parties. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary, for your comments. Do we have anyone else? Okay. Again, I want to thank everyone for their comments. This is going to be an ongoing discussion for a long, long, long time, and we're going to be part of it. I can tell you that. So we're going to move on to continuances and exceptions. Do we have any continuances or exceptions? Okay, seeing none, now our special order of business, action on a resolution ratifying the proclamation of existence of a local emergency by the Director of Emergency Services. City Manager?
Good morning. Attached in your packet is a report that summarizes the actions that I took on May 31st regarding proclaiming the existence of a local emergency due to civil unrest following the killing of Mr. George Floyd in Minneapolis. And also in your packet is a resolution that ratifies that action. I just want to announce also that on June 2nd, we lifted the curfew, and that's also attached in your packet. So this is just a ratification that's required 7 days after the action is taken by myself.
Okay, thank you. And as you mentioned, the curfew has been lifted, and so this is past action. So do I have a motion to approve the resolution ratifying the action? Councilmember Davis?
Motion to approve, Mayor.
Okay.
Second.
So I have a motion and a second. Any discussion on that? Do we have any public members?
Mayor.
Is that,
Ma-
who is
Mayor
that?
Gilmore, can I make a comment?
Oh, Councilmember O'Neill. Is
Thank
that
you. It's me. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I'm obviously gonna vote in favor of the motion, but I mean, I think that this, even the notion of having imposed a curfew has caused a fair amount of, on both sides, concerns about, the people's concerns about their civil liberties. And so I'm grateful that the curfew was released as soon as possible. But as we go forward and look at policies and things, I think that we should perhaps also have a discussion about this, and with our city manager, city attorney, our director of emergency services, and of course our police and fire chiefs, about how do we make sure that we're prepared for certain situations, and and communication with that. I realize that this happened all very quickly, but I think that this does need to be part of the discussion, because there was concern about people worried that their civil liberties were going to be infringed on. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, and it will be part of our future discussions. Is there any other comments? If not, we have a motion and a second to approve the action and the resolution, ratifying a past action. Okay, Assistant City Clerk.
Vice Mayor Hardy.
Yes.
Councilmember O'Neill.
Yes.
Councilmember Davis.
Yes.
Councilmember Watanabe.
Yes.
Councilmember Chahal.
Yes.
And that passes unanimously. Thank you. Next, we have public presentations. Do we have any members of the public, either online, downstairs? Anybody here? Okay, not seeing anyone here. Then we have reports of members and special committees. Any council members, special committees want to make a report on anything? Okay, seeing none. City Manager, Executive Director report.
I just want to mention that we are looking to add an additional meeting. The next upcoming agendas are very heavy, and particularly the one of the items coming out of the Planning Commission took 4 hours, and so we want to make sure that we have enough time at the council level by adding an extra meeting.
Okay, just let us know. Start piling them on for us. We're sheltering in place, so it gives us something to do, right? Okay. All right, next we have, adjournment. So I'm going to ask that our city council adjourn this meeting in the memory of George Floyd. So let us all take a moment to remember the life of George Floyd, who died tragically and senselessly while in police custody in Minneapolis on May 25th, 2020. We have all seen video images of his unspeakable act of brutality. This unspeakable act of brutality, the last moments of his life will forever be etched in our consciousness. On May 25th, 2020, the world lost a kind and beautiful soul. George Floyd touched the lives of all who knew him. Known by his friends as Big Floyd, they have described him as a man of peace. His sister, Philonise Floyd, said, "To know my brother is to love my brother." George grew up in the Houston's 3rd Ward neighborhood and graduated from Jack Yates High School. He went on to play basketball for South Florida State College in Avon Park, Florida, where he was a student from 1993 to 1995. He was remembered as someone who was fun to be around and always owned up to his mistakes and tried to better himself. He moved to Minnesota for work and was known in his new community as a protector and provider who didn't have a hateful bone in his body. George Floyd was a father to 2 daughters and is remembered by his oldest daughter as a great guy and a good father to his girls. Our thoughts, prayers, and condolences are with George Floyd's family, friends, and community. Our country is suffering his horrific loss. Let us now observe, we did our moment of silence. We'll do that again to honor George Floyd and reflect on the needed transformation of our collective conscious. Let us never forget how we got to this place and put all our energy into effecting fundamental and lasting change to bring an end to racism and racial injustices in our country. So if we could bow for another minute. Can I please have a motion to adjourn in his memory?
So moved. Motion to adjourn.
Can I have a second, please?
Second. Second.
Motion second. Assistant City Clerk.
Vice Mayor Hardy.
Yes.
Councilmember O'Neill.
Yes.
Councilmember Davis.
Yes.
Councilmember Watanabe.
Yes.
Councilmember Chahal.
Yes.
Mayor Gilmore.
Yes. And that passes unanimously. This meeting is adjourned.
Goodbye.